What's going on, everybody? This is Dave from Steel City Jones Flight Academy. Today we're talking everything about aircraft, all of the popular drones on the market, all the pros and cons for each, and we're trying to compare them all relatively equal from apples to apples. A lot of times it's very difficult to compare apples to apples for aircraft, and we get people calling us asking us, what can we do for this much money? I have this much money. What's the best option out there for me? And often there really is not one perfect drone that's going to do everything someone needs it to do. And it's a matter of need versus wish list or wants. And that's kind of where we need to try to whittle down to try to get to a decision about which aircraft to buy. Now, we're going to primarily discuss two different options. The most popular options we always get asked about, which are the Matrice 300 RTK and the new Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced, because those are pretty much going to be the industry standards as far as what we're going to want to do for industry kind of work, inspection kind of work, public safety, search and rescue, those type of things. And then we're also going to compare them to other aircraft that have been out longer, and some different other options that people also ask us about. And then we're just going to have them all across the board as far as trying to compare them apples to apples the best that we can. So just a footnote about this, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the Matrice 200 and 210 because as of right now, it is at the end of life. Once the existing stock runs out, that is no longer going to be available. So what we're going to start off with is the very first one is flight time. Flight time is a big thing that we have to consider because if we don't get enough flight time to do our missions, then the aircraft is really not suited for what we need. So for an aircraft like this, for the Matrice 300, it's going to give us the maximum amount of flight time out there. On average, for the H20 and the H20T cameras that have the zoom, the thermal capabilities, and even the P1 camera that's, again, going to be very similar in weight goes for payload, we're looking between 32 to 34 minutes on average. A lot of people ask us, well, we see DJI specs that say this is more toward 50 to 55 minutes. Well, a couple of things here to take into account. That is with no payload that they're doing that with, and that might be exactly, they're taking it all the way down to where the aircraft is falling out of the sky. When we give flight time numbers, we're going to be looking at times where we're actually on the ground with 20% remaining on the battery. That's important for people to know is because if you fly the batteries down too low, you can damage them. Heat kills batteries and flying them down too low generates heat. So the lower you go, the more that you can harm the batteries. So a good rule of thumb, get them down by 20% and look at your flight times. An aircraft like this, and for all the Mavics for that matter on the market, the Mavic 2s, are going to give you between 22 to 24 minutes. So 22 to 24 minutes of flight time is very typical for what these aircraft can do. Another very important consideration we should be looking at is whether the aircraft is water resistive. Adding the factor of water resistive to the variable can increase the price significantly because an aircraft like this, which is the Mavic 2, even if it's the Enterprise version, they are not water resistive. And I know I've talked to many people, and many people try to argue with me very vehemently that, and I've flown this Mavic 2 in the rain or the snow and I never had a problem with it. I cannot even try to debate dumb luck. There's nothing to prevent water from going and getting exposed into the electronics, into the motors, and this aircraft can fail immediately, fall out of the sky, a flight hazard, and then your aircraft is just crashed. So again, I know many clients that have called us up asking us for new equipment because they have tried flying this in the rain and they got the results that I'm just telling you about. So an aircraft like this is IP45 rated. It is water resistive. You can fly it in the rain, fly it in the snow relatively safely. The camera sensors on here also are water resistive, and that makes that a very good, attractive package. So where you need an aircraft as a go-to aircraft to fly in any condition, rain, snow, high winds, that is an aircraft like this as well. That also leads into our next variable, which is flight performance and stability. And even the Mavic 2s even do a better job than we ever thought they were going to do when they first came out. And these can handle up to 20-mile-an-hour winds fairly good. Now, obviously, when you're trying to use RTK technology and you're using the RTK module for the advanced, or you're using NTRIP or the base station for the RTK with the Matrice 300, that's going to give you even better flight performance. The hover is going to be more accurate on the Z and Y axis, and also on the Z axis for sure, the aircraft will not go up or down as much in variance and high wind gusts. And through our testing, we on average see an RTK aircraft only have between 4 to 5 inches of variance on the altitude to Z axis, which is amazing, compared to an aircraft that's not, can actually have a variance of about 4 to 5 feet up and down. So take that into consideration. RTK will actually fly the aircraft better. Matrice 300 definitely flies smoother and better when it's in RTK mode. So these aircraft all fly very good. And you can see how that compares to, on the chart, against other aircraft that's on the market right now. Another very popular consideration that we always get asked about is the thermal camera capabilities and features. The newer aircraft, again, the Matrice 300, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced, they have high-resolution thermal cameras on them. Both of them are 640 lines by 512 lines of resolution. That's as high as that you can get. They're very clean, they're very good, and they are radiometric. So that also helps you out with that. And now the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced does not have isotherm technology or capability, and the Matrice 300 does. What is isotherms? Well, we're not going to turn this into a thermal class, but isotherms are a better way to be able to help filter out certain temperatures that you only want to see. Like for search and rescue, for example, when you're looking for specific certain temperature ranges, that's what isotherms do, and that's an important consideration. But overall, these cameras are very good. Comparatively so, where the older Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual is, that is quite much a lot lower in resolution, and many of our clients feel that it really has not that many uses for commercial flying. Now, let's talk about zoom capability. So, again, a lot of people need zoom capability, and that does become with a price point. Now, every model has gotten better for zoom capability. For the Mavic 2, for example, Mavic 2 can do up to 6 times a zoom, which is 2 times optical, 4 times digital for 6 times complete. But now the new Mavic Enterprise Advanced can do up to 32 times zoom. But that is a digital zoom only on a 46 megapixel camera. The 46 megapixel camera does minimize the pixelization, but again, if you're trying to do high resolution output prints, for example, or you need to really zoom in on some high resolution, what you're looking for, like let's say a label on a connector, for example, or you're trying to see if a certain fastener has a lot of rust on it or not, depending upon how far you're away, that you may or may not get that. So obviously, the more zoom capability that we can have on an aircraft is going to allow us to keep the aircraft back further away from our point of interest and for a more safer flight. Whereas an aircraft like this, still, even with 32 times zoom, is going to have to be closer to a cell tower, for example. One of our benchmark tests that we do is where an aircraft like this can read a license plate at 1,000 feet away, 200 feet high. Now, an aircraft like this can read a license plate about 250 feet away, 200 feet high. So again, this is much more robust of a zoom capability on there, and it is rock solid stable, like it's on a tripod. This does a very good job as well. It's come a long way, but I want to make sure that you understand there's still no comparing these two as far as their capabilities for the zoom. Why is that important? Well, if you're a public safety agency, for example, and you want to do crowd monitoring where you want to keep the aircraft as far away as possible and not let people know that your drone is up in the air monitoring anything, well then that's the aircraft for you. Now, one of my favorite talking points to customers that I like to talk about that many people don't take into consideration is overall size of aircraft as far as relationship to line of sight. So I think that most of my audience watching this understand that the FAA requires us to follow line of sight rules. That means we have to be able to see the aircraft and fly at line of sight, and it has to be a reasonable line of sight. It can't just be a little tiny dust speck in the sky. So what that means is the larger aircraft gets us a nice advantage to be able to fly out further away, and we can still see the attitude of the aircraft, or basically see the aircraft much better compared to a Mavic sized drone here that we can lose fairly easy 300 feet in the sky. And when this becomes about 800 to 1,000 feet away, it really is a smaller dot, and that becomes an issue for line of sight. And it is, again, a lot of people start, when we try to do flight training, for example, on site with our customers, they start becoming uneasy when we're starting to go 300, 400, 500 feet out with that because they can't see the drone. A lot of commercial applications, you need to fly an aircraft 500, 700, 800 feet away. It's not that uncommon. And when you want to try to go into like crowd monitoring or surveillance, you want to even keep the aircraft further away, and an aircraft like this can do that. Now, we're going to talk about second remote controller capabilities. Now, that is something that a lot of people do not take into consideration. So we're going to talk about this in depth. So an aircraft like this, while it does have the capability of having a second controller operate the drone, that does not mean you're going to get a very efficient use out of it. So an aircraft like this has a gimbal that comes down, it connects into the camera port here, and it can operate completely independent of the drone. So for example, if the drone yaws around 360 degrees, that camera cannot move. It can be completely independent. Or if you need to operate and pan the camera with the drone staying exactly where it is, that's where that is. So for this, we could have a dedicated camera operator, dedicated pilot, where the pilot's only worrying about the drone and the piloting duties, and then the camera operator is operating completely independent and doing everything with the camera that they need to do. And an aircraft like this, you're going to have some amount of range where the camera can pan a little bit. You cannot operate it independently of the drone. So when you need to pan your camera, you're going to have to yaw the aircraft. There's no way around that. So that's where a lot of people don't really take that into consideration. So for when you're trying to do a lot of inspection work, for example, that is a perfect example why you want to be able to get a second remote controller for separate camera operator duties. Another thing that we can do with this aircraft is we can fly this further distances away. We'll talk about that more in a second. But for example, we can hand off control to another operator using this. We can have another operator as far away as we want to, maybe even a half a mile away, and we can turn over the controls to another person. So we can do longer distance flights because we can use a second remote pilot and camera operator. Another important factor is the overall modularity and expandability capacities for different aircraft. So an aircraft like this is completely modular. You can use different interchangeable camera sensors. You can put different payloads on here. You can use spotlights. You can put a drop system on here. You can go ahead and put a parachute on here. This uses SDK technology. SDK is where third-party developers can add a lot of different features and functionality in the aftermarket and offer the user the most possible products as possible. Whereas this is basically what you get is what you see. The advanced, for example, come with the spotlight, it comes with the beacon, the loudspeaker, and then the advanced comes with the RTK module. But that is it as far as basically what you can do. And it is a fixed camera on here. There's no interchanging the cameras out or being able to upgrade or use different kind of cameras. Portability is another important factor that a lot of our clients have to take into consideration. A lot of our clients need a smaller aircraft that they can put in their backpack or in a small portable case in their patrol car, and they don't have the latitude to be able to have a bigger, bulky case they can stick in their vehicle. And also, when you, for example, when you have a bigger case for something like this and you're trying to load it up with the batteries, that a case like that can weigh easily over 50 pounds. And that can be, a little challenging to get it around. Now, as far as quick deployment goes, this aircraft can get up as far as little as 1 minute, for example, it can get up in the air. Versus this is an aircraft that probably is going to take around 4 to 5 minutes to be able to get it set up and get it in the air. Now, again, it depends on how quick do you need to be able to get into and what your environments are for what you're doing. Let's talk about RTK. Now, we have loads of videos on there about what RTK does and what the advantages are. A really quick snapshot is RTK is a commercial grade GPS system that's going to help you with many different things, such as taking out the compass so it takes away flight hazards, potential risks for flyaways, and also more safer flying when we need to fly around high tension power lines, excessive metal like such as bridges, railroads. That's what RTK does, plus it's more precise. When we use NTRIP RTK for mapping, we can get much more precise data for survey grade accuracy applications. Now, the new Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced has RTK on it, but that really is not what I would consider to be a mapping drone that is for survey grade accuracy. That camera is not going to get you 1 to 2 centimeters of accuracy. It's just not made to do that. But it does have RTK that allows you to have really safe flying. But you can only use the module that it comes with that you put on top of the aircraft for NTRIP. This does not have the ability to use the DRTK base station that you can set up on site. What does that mean? Well, that means that you have to have very good internet connection where you're flying. If you're in rural areas where the base station would be a better option, that's where that's what this is going to be for, because that can do either NTRIP using the internet connection, or you can use a base station for this, where that cannot use a base station. Now, the Matrice 300 can handle the highest wind possible. We have flown this in 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts, and it handled it very stable. With the RTK, it keeps it much more planted. Now, again, I don't want to minimize what the Mavic 2 can do, because we can fly that in up to about 20 miles an hour fairly stable. And especially when we're using the RTK on a new Mavic 2 Advanced, it's going to be very tight on the Z-axis up and down as far as altitude, less altitude drop compared to a regular Mavic 2 that only has the consumer grade GPS. Now, on to mapping and mapping features. Just about all the new aircraft on the market have some sort of compatibility to be able to fly for mapping and autonomous flight planning. But to what degree, and are they compatible with the latest and greatest and best apps out there like Drone Deploy, Pix4D? Well, that's going to be all really up to the different type of aircraft you have. All DJI aircraft, for the most part, are capable and compatible with those new latest softwares that you're going to be able to use. But that doesn't mean that all aircraft are going to get you survey grade accuracy or what you need to be able to do to accomplish to get that. So for example, when this aircraft first came out, we only had the H20 and the H20T cameras for that. Those cameras are not going to do survey grade accuracy, whereas now the P1 sensor that's available for that is going to get us really the best accuracy in the market that you can possibly get. Now, the new Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced also can do mapping, but that camera as well is not going to get you survey grade results. Now, other parts of mapping that we're going to want to take into consideration are what's called terrain following. So for example, this aircraft now has the capability of staying and following the terrain as it goes up and down when we're mapping. And that is very important because that's going to allow us to be able to use less ground control points and also help keep the Z-axis data for our, for tighter accuracy along the lines. Where previously, all aircraft pretty much are going to have to basically just fly flat. And whether you're going to get peaks and valleys for your terrain, well, if you're going to have a lot of deviation on your sight, then you're going to have to use more ground control to be able to keep those specs in tighter. And terrain following is a new feature that really allows that to take that to the next level. All right, let's talk about ease of use. So from a learning standpoint, for the most part, they are all equally easy to learn how to fly. And it's a matter too of do you like to learn how to fly in a larger aircraft or a smaller aircraft. It really doesn't matter for the most part though. And all DJI aircraft use either the Go 4 or the Pilot app. And those are apps for the flight control, and they're very intuitive. They're very easy to learn how to use. The workflow on them is very intuitive. Other aircraft that are not DJI are not as intuitive. They're not as polished. You can get around and be able to get what you need to do, but especially when you have a remote pilot that's been flying DJI for years, and then you try to get them into another aircraft like the Parrot, for example, it's not an easy transition. So ease of use and operation is pretty much all across the board better for all DJI aircraft. So those are all the variables that I wanted to point out to you that might help you make the best decision possible. There's a lot of things that go into consideration when we're trying to buy an aircraft. And again, trying to compare apples to apples isn't always the easiest thing. But I'm trying to get you down the rabbit hole as best I can to help you identify your own needs versus your wants. So that, an aircraft like this might be, well, that's great. I want that, want that, want that. But then you're looking down all the variables in here and you say, well, I might not need that, or I don't think I'm going to use that. And then a lot of people are in very tight budgets, so we're trying to get in whatever we can to fit your budget. And that's what it's all about. So if you want any more help trying to go down to identify anything, or you want to get any cost estimates on the different packages out there, please give us a call, email us, contact us. We'll be glad to give you some quotes on this. We really have a lot of great package deals out there. We have finance options. We're here to help you out for whatever you need to do. So I hope this video has been helpful. And if you haven't yet, please help us grow the channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. I would very much appreciate any of the help and support you can give us. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon.